Thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and this is part 2 of a brick breakdown video of LEGO Big Bang themes. Last Friday, LEGO David and I sat down to discuss LEGO's ongoing strategy for Big Bang themes, starting off with Ninjago in 2011, Chima in 2013, Nexo Knights in 2015, and now Monkey Kid in 2020. So if you haven't seen part 1, check that one out first. The link is in the description below, but if you have seen it, then let's get started and jump right in. Last time, since we discussed Ninjago at length, I think it's a good time to compare it to LEGO's newest try at a Big Bang theme, LEGO Monkey Kid 2020, which does actually share a lot of similarities with Ninjago. What do you think of the show so far, if you've seen it?
So I've got also mixed thoughts on it. So on one hand, I do appreciate the effort of making it stand out with a new animation style. I always preferred 2D animation over the 3D CG animation, in my opinion. It just appeals to me a lot more. So the choice of making Monkey Kid 2D animation instead of 3D, I feel like was a really good decision to make it stand out. But on the other hand, I feel like this kind of acted as a double-edged sword. So it's good that they decided to go the 2D animation route, but we are really weird style to say the least. So the characters kind of just move around at a speed of light, making silly faces. It just doesn't give you time to breathe. It's just really energetic and really fast. I'm not really a big fan of it, so I feel like they should probably just, in animation, I don't want the characters to be stiff, but I don't want them to be as bouncy as rubber either. And I feel like Ninjago handles its animation better in that respect, even though I do prefer 2D over 3D animation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I agree with pretty much everything you said. The Monkey Kid show is a breath of fresh air because, again, you said it uses the 2D animation. It looks distinctly different from any other show that LEGO's put out. But at the same time, the animation is seizure-inducing. You can barely tell what's going on the screen, and if you binge all the entire season like I did, with the pilots and the 10 episodes, you end up feeling very overwhelmed at the end of it. It's really, really frenetic type of animation, and I do feel like that kind of translates over to the story as well, because obviously we had a pilot set of episodes which were the same length as Ninjago pilots, but the problem with it was that while the Ninjago pilot actually felt like you got to know the characters, you had a clear understanding of each of the 4 main characters, plus Sensei Wu, plus Garmadon, plus a bit of Samukai, and you did have a fully concluded story from beginning to end, with the Monkey Kid episodes, you barely get to know any of the characters. Coming off of just the pilot episodes alone, I have absolutely no idea or handle as to what May's character is. I have no idea why she has a dragon motorcycle and seems to be some sort of a superhero, but also seems to be normal. Pixie doesn't really have that much of a character other than just gruff. Sandy also doesn't really have a character. Even Monkey Kid himself doesn't really make a big impression on you in the pilot episodes other than, I guess, he's very energetic and yells a lot. And I do feel like the style of animation didn't really lend itself to good storytelling, and I think that that's going to hurt Monkey Kid down the line because even after watching all of the entire first 10 episodes of the season, it's not really leaving me with the same impact as, say, 10 episodes of Ninjago did. And I do think that part of that is because you're starting off a show with the 10-minute animation style. Obviously, Ninjago can get away with it because you already know the characters, you're here for the action and for the ride, but with something like Monkey Kid, you can barely get a character arc within just 10 minutes of an episode while juggling all these other supporting casts at the same time. And I think that that's something that does hurt the show, is that it just goes by at such a fast pace that you can barely tell what happened and barely get a good feel of who these characters are.
Yeah. So I had hoped that after the pilot season with the 2 episodes, it would get better and have like a more fleshed out story like Ninjago had, like with the pilot season of Ninjago, and then you get the full season 1. Was still a good start, even though it doesn't hold up as well as some of the later season. It was still a good start for Ninjago, but this, I feel, it's not a really good start, not a really good hook to hook you into the story. Basically filler and fight scenes and not really a lot of character.
Exactly, and you know, it is too early to tell how Monkey Kid is doing. I will say that it's really strange to me for a Big Bang theme. I literally never see it advertised anywhere. On the latest LEGO catalogs, they have full page spreads of every other theme, and Monkey Kid, there's literally one set featured. Like, they just have the Flaming Foundry or the boat set that's featured on literally half a page in the catalog. And then you have a full multi-page spread for Ninjago, for Friends, for Technic, for whatnot. It's really strange to me how they're not really seeming to be marketing this. Maybe it's different in China. I know that they really were pushing this in China and in the Asian market. So it could be totally different there for all I know. But at least in the US, it seemed that they're not really marketing this, which I do feel like will hurt it a lot in the long run.
Especially when we've had so much overpriced sets, honestly. I think the biggest thing that's gonna kill the line in terms of sale is how overpriced the sets are. Just like how many people actually own the sets. Look at it, like 100 people only have it. Whereas Ninjago is like 1,000 people for each Ninjago wave. Look at it. It's a lot better, you know. One way to tell how well some sets sell, at least among the brick set community, is to look at how many people actually own the set. I know it's not really reliable because it doesn't tell how well it does with kids, but at least we know within the AFOL community or brick set community, I guess. So it's not a very reliable source, but still a little bit of insight into how well it does.
Wow, I never really would have thought of checking Brickset owned lists as trying to figure out how well stuff does. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the same people who are marking Ninjago sets as owned are going to be marking Monkey Kid sets as owned if they have them. So that is really crazy seeing that discrepancy there, especially looking at a Monkey Kid set that came out at around the same time as a Ninjago set. The Ninjago set has thousands of people who own it, while the Monkey Kid set, as you said, has 100 if it's lucky, maybe a few hundred. So that is really unfortunate because I do feel like the quality of most of the Monkey Kid sets are some of the best that LEGO's done in a long time. It's almost like LEGO movie quality to me, where it seems that they really go all out in terms of the details and the prints and the kind of the complexity of the builds. It's just so much better than the average, say, Ninjago or Nexo Knights or Chima set. But then I feel like the price and the storyline of the TV show is really going to hurt it there. So that is a big shame, and I hope this doesn't discourage LEGO from doing stuff like this in the future. I don't think it's because the sets themselves are bad, it's because your show could use some work.
So, in my opinion, they should drop the Big Bang themes strategy, because I even made a topic on Eurobricks asking opinions of people. Are Big Bang themes a bad strategy? You can search it on Eurobricks. All the past few LEGO themes that we have gotten in the past 5 years have been Big Bang themes, with the exception of Ultra Agents and the Hidden Side. I feel like those were the only themes that didn't fall in the same category. And to be quite frank, I actually do like those smaller themes a lot more than the Big Bang themes, because, I mean, yeah, they're not gonna dedicate an entire storyline to those small, like 1 or 2 year themes, but if they make some interesting, cool designs for sets, then that's gonna leave a bigger impact than, say, just more mechs and more jets and more motorcycles. So I feel like they should return to more casual themes like castle or space or pirates, not necessarily in the same format as they were before, maybe having more unique twists to them. So say, instead of forcing in like vehicles into a castle theme like they did with Nexo Knights, I feel like that was a really big mistake, and that turned off a lot of castle fans. The fact that they turned one of their favorite themes into basically a Ninjago clone.
Yeah, I kind of agree there. I think that if LEGO does want to continue the Big Bang theme strategy, if they're going to pour that much budget into it anyway, they really should invest in a good TV show writer and people who know what they're doing and have a lot of experience with successful children's TV shows, and potentially give them a little bit more creative freedom, such that they do not need to wrap up the entire year's story in a 45-minute pilot. They have a little bit more wiggle room, maybe ask them to write a show and then they'll make sets based off of it and see how the show does first. I feel like LEGO puts the sets first, and then they design a show around the sets. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it worked for Ninjago, and it is working for Ninjago. And I do realize that that's a collaborative process. I mean, there's writers in the room with the sets, and they kind of come up with stuff together. But then you've got the obligatory shoehorned in sets and whatnot. And I feel like giving a writer creative freedom to develop a good children's TV show first and foremost, and then focus on tying in a Lego theme to it afterwards, you'd face a lot more success in doing it the other way around. And I think I'll bring up again Avatar, The Last Airbender. It's a good children's TV show, and if you try to think back to that show, for those of you who have watched it, there's not a lot of things that you can make sets for, at least vehicle-wise. You've got some tanks, maybe, you got some big scorpions, some animals. That's really about it. And then, of course, you've got your main characters and the main character's animal and whatnot, speaking in general terms. But people are clamoring for sets based on this because the show was so good. And no, there's not a lot of Lego set material out of it other than boats and location-based sets. But I can guarantee you right now that if you put out a new line of Avatar The Last Airbender sets, those sets would sell far, far better than any of their recent attempts at Big Bang themes like Nexo Knights, Chima, or Monkey Kid.
I absolutely agree, but I have to point out though that the idea of making a story based on your Lego theme actually kind of can act as a double-edged sword, because if you try to force in a story and something that could very easily work without a story, like say a castle theme, I feel like a lot of older fans might be turned off. Like, a Lego theme doesn't need to have a great story in order to be a great theme. If you have like a well-designed lineup of sets, then people aren't gonna care about the story if they like the sets. And I've seen that actually with a lot of AFOLs who aren't typically into Ninjago, like the Ninjago movie wave. Like, a lot of AFOLs who didn't care about the Ninjago TV show really liked the sets and bought all of them, basically. And the most popular example of that would be the Ninjago City set, which, my goodness, that sold like hotcakes. Actually, I feel like the Ninjago movie sets, because they were so well designed, were one of the main reasons why Ninjago was one of the top-selling themes of 2017. Not because of the movie, because the movie was actually met with pretty mediocre results, like mixed reviews, and not even the Ninjago fans really cared about it. But the sets were really well designed, and they sold well. And I feel like you need both good designs and a good story, or you can have good designs and still sell well without a good story. That's what I think can apply with some teams. Not all of them, but some teams.
Oh, I totally see what you're saying. I mean, some of my favorite themes are the ones that really weren't that story-driven, like Power Miners or Atlantis or Monster Fighters, even Hidden Side. I think some of those smaller themes that are Lego's own IP that they just come up with are some of the most unique and fun stuff that they do because they're willing to experiment with sorts of different new things. That being said, though, I think I was referring to when I was saying a story is needed. That's if you're gonna try to do a Big Bang theme, you gotta make sure your story's good. Otherwise, I totally agree with you. You can definitely have perfectly good themes with sets that sell well if they're designed well and are gripping enough to appeal to kids. I mean, I think, I don't know how well they did, but if I can remember back correctly, Space Police 3 and Power Miners, which were some of the powerhouse themes of the 2009 to 2010 era, that sold pretty well because the sets, quite frankly, were quite good and drew a lot of kids' attention. But with that, I think we will end things here. The original discussion lasted for over an hour, so I will be posting this as part 1, and stay tuned for next Monday when I will be posting part 2 of this discussion, in which we'll focus on the themes that we have not discussed yet, which of course are Chima and Nexo Knights we'll dive into in depth, as well as wrap up our final thoughts on LEGO's strategy for Big Bang themes and if they should change it. Once again, thanks to LEGO David for continually being a recurring guest on the show. And again, tune in to the next part of this episode coming to you very soon. Thanks and bye-bye for now.
What were your thoughts on the Chima and Nexo Knights sets? Because we didn't talk about those too much. The discussion seems to be focused on Monkey Kid and Ninjago more.
So personally, between the two, I think I preferred Chima a lot more, and the reason for that is because Chima, I felt, actually brought something new to the table, whereas While Ninjago focused on a few main protagonists and repeated iterations of their vehicles fighting a new enemy every season, Chima was more of a large scale type battle sort of theme where you had all sorts of different factions. They all had their own alliances and motivations. And from the setup alone, it was a really cool setup because you had all these different animal tribes. The first wave alone launched with 6 or 7 different tribes, and they kept on adding more. And even throughout the show, if you ignore some of the wonky voice acting and the kind of weird sort of storylines that they went on, there weren't clear good guys and bad guys for a lot of the show. I mean, the wolves went back and forth a ton. The gorillas were mostly on the good side, like the eagles and lions. And the Ravens were pretty much neutral. I mean, one episode they could be helping the good guys, one episode they could be helping the quote-unquote bad guys, and the crocodiles were mostly only bad because of one person in power that was bad. So it was kind of interesting seeing that and seeing these warring factions kind of clash with each other. And I think that was really represented super well in the first wave of sets, maybe not so much in the later waves, but they still did this because they essentially came up with all these cast of characters, and of course you have a main cast of characters, but you have all sorts of side characters who have their own vehicles dedicated to them, which was really, really strange for a LEGO theme. I mean, in Ninjago, you don't get Darrett's mech, like a big brown Darrett's mech for $80, but in Chima you got all sorts of stuff, like you got like a Straynor's Saber Cycle or Eaglar's motorcycle, and all these side characters that barely had any lines in the TV show, but essentially you're supposed to use their vehicles as army building. And I think that was what really inspired kids to get maybe even duplicates of some vehicles that they really liked, because in the show you could see these really massive scale battles going on between dozens and hundreds of different types of the same vehicle. Like you could see hundreds of lion tanks and eagle jets and croc boats and whatnot. I think it was a really cool thing that LEGO hasn't really done before, of just coming up with all sorts of different unique factions within one wave and just producing a ton of vehicles based on those factions. And I really wish that they do something similar to that in a theme going forwards, because that's something that I feel was really unique about Chima and something that really no other theme had. That being said, I will say that especially in the later years, the quality of the builds kind of dropped off a little bit. You got really, really strange and wonky sets like the Bladvik bear mech, which sadly was our only bear vehicle. I mean, it was basically a solid statue. You couldn't move its feet, you couldn't move the legs. I mean, the arms barely moved. It did transform into a car, but that was about it. And equally strange stuff like a mammoth stronghold with kind of a strange structure build, not really much you could do, but with some bad outliers, the majority of them were really inventive and cool vehicles. And I do feel like the set-wise, it was a really cool theme.
One thing that does stand out from the last wave of Chima, I feel like, were those battle packs. I think those were really interesting. I feel like Chima had a lot of potential to have more like, also be more of a sandbox theme like Hero Factory, where you can have a fun world where characters have to fight each other, have their own cultures, their own tribes. I feel really bad that they saved those tribe packs for only the last wave. They should have done this right from the start, because those were awesome, to be honest. Easily the best thing about the last wave.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. I totally agree, and especially imagining that for all the different factions, that would have been really nice.
Yeah, I think having the factions and tribes was a really great thing, because instead of having just all the focus be on just 6 characters, you have an entire world of characters fighting each other like a big, large-scale war. And you can even go as far as buy multiples of the same set and have, because even in the show they're just multiples of the same vehicle, just having as an army basically. I think army building was a great strength of Chima, and they even have a lot of polybags and cheap stuff where you can just get more like extra crocodiles or extra lions to get for your army. That was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on the gimmicks for, I guess, all of the themes, for the battle suits or the spinners or the speedors? What do you think about those?
And I definitely actually do prefer the Chima speeders over the Ninjago spinners that we're doing at the time, to be honest. I think they're just a lot more fun, and you can actually use the pieces in unique ways, like those shells or those upper parts. You should actually use them as like for interesting mocks. I've seen them used, and actually they have a lot of mocking potential. something that the Ninjago spinners, I feel like they don't really have as much.
I actually really agree with you there too. I love the Speedors, and I really can imagine using those molded animal heads as, say, the pauldrons of a large buildable figure or something. It's just such a shame that when they changed the style for the Fire vs. Ice sets, I'm assuming to change budget so they could just print a face on the same mold. That really took it down for me because one of the things I really liked about it were the really detailed and unique animal head molds. And that was all kind of thrown out by the upgrade, or quote-unquote upgrade, in 2014. So I liked the early Speedors, but not the later ones. But I guess now we can move on.
Okay, now Nexo Knights. What do you think about the Nexo Knights sets?
I think that Nexo Knights had a few good sets, like the Fortrex and arguably the Mecha Horse, maybe Clay's car, but that was pretty generic, and the rest of them were not great. The villains for the first year kind of outshone the heroes, and that was one thing that people really loved about Nexo Knights' first wave, the lava monsters. However, going in the direction of the storm monsters for the second wave, I don't know if that was the best choice. The gray and sand blue color scheme honestly was a little bit bland, and nothing really stood out on that wave. And then finally, I mean, that was it. You got the Techno Vampires for the very last wave, which didn't even get a show tie-in, and you only really got 2 vehicles from them. So it was really only those 2 monster waves, and I feel like, especially if you look at the concept art, and you look at all sorts of really unique designs that they came up with in the Nexo Knights dictionary that they put out, there's a lot of missed opportunity here that I feel like wasted potential for the theme that really could have been explored a lot better. One of the other things that really bugs me about Nexo Knights, especially as the line went on, is that they had a primary, secondary, and tertiary color scheme, and they really stuck to it because every single hero had their own personal color scheme. So Axel had keyed orange, Aaron had lime, Clay had blue and whatnot. And then you had the trans neon orange of the cockpits and weapon highlights, which, alright, sure. And then you have like a silver, and then you have blue, and then you have dark blue, and then the final year you had gold, and all of those colors just stacked on top of each other really did not make for a good set. And then in wave 2, in the second year, you had orange. Orange was mandatory on every single one of the hero vehicles. So all of a sudden you had blue, trans neon orange, regular orange, and then the hero's personal color scheme, and then gold for the last year. And I think that was really something that dragged it down and something that really messed with the color scheming of the heroes' vehicles and actively made them look worse than they actually were because they didn't have cohesive color schemes. That was one really big issue to me, but I don't know. What do you think about the Nexo Knights sets?
One thing I do like about Nexo Knights is the villains. I feel like there was a much bigger focus on villain vehicles instead of Ninjago. The hero vehicles I don't find as interesting, but I feel like Nexo Knights villain vehicles were quite interesting. And much like Chima, there is that army builder factor where you can have some of the villains just get more sets and then have an army of them battling the heroes, which again is something that Ninjago doesn't really have. So yeah, I feel like it was a lot of wasted potential. I think easily where Nexo Knights shines is with the monsters and the villains. Again, you can have them, there's a lot of like random monsters, you can have them put together to create an army, and that's fun. But yeah, they kind of went downhill after the first wave with the lava monsters, which were basically demons, which is cool. Yeah, the stones monsters had a really unappealing color scheme, and they were an interesting idea, but not executed too well. And then the last wave with the techno vampires was also a weird thing to do. Anything like the sea monsters, I think would have been the one I would have liked the most to see.
I agree. The villains really had this spotlight in Nexo Knights, which is something LEGO rarely ever does. So that was really nice to see. And again, I also will echo the statement that the hero vehicles outside of the Fortrex were really kind of just boring and didn't really have too much going on for them, and as well as the fact that they just didn't have good color schemes either. So I think that was how I felt about Nexo Knights. I'm curious now, as we wrap up this video, do you have any closing thoughts on both Chima and Nexo Knights, but also just Big Bang Themes as a whole, and kind of just to wrap up this whole video, what you think about what LEGO's been doing with Big Bang Themes and how you feel that they're going in the future?
Yeah, I do like the army building aspect of Nexo Knights and Chima, which I feel like Ninjago is something that kind of lacks. Like they have maybe the one time they did the army building aspect was with the Serpentines and the uh, the skeletons, and maybe they kind of did, but they kind of shifted away from that, where you had only like one or two villain minifigures, and that was it. Like the pirates, there's only like six characters or something, and that's it. There's no entire army of pirates, which could have been cool, but yeah, I do prefer having a more army building aspect over just what Ninjago does, which is basically just focus on the heroes and then kind of minor focus on the villains. So both Chima and X do things that do things some things they do in some respects better than Ninjago, which I appreciate. How would you rank all the Big Bang themes from the worst to the best, or not worst, weakest from the best, in your opinion? So without counting Ninjago because it's the obvious choice for first.
Oh, that's a good question. So, not counting Ninjago, which, again, as you said, would be first, I think I'm going to have to say Nexo Knights last. I wasn't the biggest fan of Nexo Knights, not the sets nor the show. I think next I'd have to say Monkey Kid and then Chima. I think the thing that really stood out to me about Chima was the large-scale group warfare type thing that LEGO doesn't really touch nowadays, or they haven't really touched since. I really loved being able to army build characters and sets, as you said, and I also really loved the premise of it, having factions that weren't necessarily good guys or bad guys, but just looking out for their own interests. One of the things I did like in the TV show was the fact that the wolves fought the crocodiles just as much as they fought the lions, for example, and the ravens were just trying to steal from everyone. That's what they were doing, and it wasn't really drawing a line between, okay, these are the bad animals and these are the good animals and they're fighting. It was more of like a chaotic world where in any given episode, one person could be a good guy or a bad guy. And I found that pretty refreshing for a LEGO theme. It wasn't handled the best for Chima because the writing of the show just, quite frankly, wasn't that good. And especially as you got into later years, the lines between good guys and bad guys were much more clearly drawn. But that was one thing I did like. Sets-wise, Monkey Kid has all of them beat, but then factoring in the show and factoring in all the other stuff surrounding it, I will say that I'll have to put that one second, but it's a close second because I do think the sets are really good.
Same, probably. Like I think I kind of tend to gravitate toward Nexo Knights more than Monkey Kid because I feel like it has a lot more affordable and a lot more cheaper sets than Monkey Kid, which I think is something Monkey Kid really fails at, is making affordable sets that everyone can buy. They really should have focused on having at least one or two like $10 small sets. I mean, seriously, $35 for the cheapest Monkey Kid sets, that's ridiculous. I don't know what in the world they were thinking when they made that decision.
Oh, 100% agreed. It's really ridiculous, and I'm really surprised that they didn't have at least one more cheaper set. I mean, not even a polybag that's widely available. I know there's a delivery cart polybag, but I don't even know what the distribution was on that. I only got mine from Bricklink because I never saw it here in the States. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I wish there were more cheap sets for Monkey Kid, and it's really hard for kids to get into the theme too, especially with the cheapest set, as you said, being $35, and comparing that to, say, $35 Ninjago set, the value just isn't there. But I guess now we are approaching 1 hour, so we might as well wrap up. I'm curious to hear from you kind of what your general thoughts are, if you have a closing statement on Big Bang themes, yay or nay, and what your recommendation is for them to do.
If they do want to continue this strategy, I don't think it's gonna go in any direction. Maybe you might be able to keep Ninjago around for some time, but if you continue making themes like this, you're not gonna find yourself your next Bionicle or next Ninjago. You're just gonna continue leaving limited memory from people because LEGO themes do leave an impact on the fans, and I think that's actually something LEGO really underestimates, how much impact a LEGO line leaves on the fans of it. And I feel like they should focus more on making more unique and original themes instead of trying to emulate Ninjago's success like they did 3 times at this point.
I agree with that, and again, if there's one last thing I have to add, LEGO, if you want to make a Big Bang theme, I would strongly recommend investing in good writers for a good show. If you want to make your own creative theme and maybe not necessarily tie a strict story to it, don't be afraid to try new things. Fans love stuff like Hidden Side and before that, Monster Fighters, Power Miners, and Atlantis, and so on. Fans just love being able to play around and make up their own stories as much as they love big LEGO themes with big TV shows. So I think it's important to have a mix of both, and while I do think that Big Bang themes are really fun because people can get a ton of sets based on a particular theme, they really aren't sustainable with the amount of budget that's going into them unless you have a big plan for making the story resonate well with kids. And I think it's probably a good place to end the video here. Again, thank you so much, David, for coming on and chatting with me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you had as much fun as I did discussing the LEGO Big Bang themes.
Yeah, thank you very much for talking to me. It was a really fun time.
All right, well, I'll talk to you later. And thank you all for listening in. Stay tuned to Duckbricks for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks, and bye-bye for now.